NUS winter's grip, surviving famine and plague in Viking North. Forget the muscle-bound, axe-wielding berserker of popular culture. That image, forged in fantasy and fueled by romantic sagas, crumbles under the harsh light of archaeological reality. The true Viking, stripped bare of his horned helmet and Hollywood bravado, was often an emaciated farmer, locked in a brutal, unending struggle for mere survival. This investigation will expose the uncomfortable truth. The most formidable enemies of the early Norse weren't the Anglo-Saxons or the Franks, but an unrelenting climate and an invisible army of microbes. The evidence is etched into their very bones. Skeletal remains unearthed from ancient Nordic burial sites tell a grim story of chronic malnutrition. Dental enamel hypoplasia, a telltale sign of childhood hunger, and widespread osteoporosis speak volumes about lives lived on the brink. These weren't the hallmarks of a conquering warrior elite, but of a people constantly battling scarcity. The question isn't whether they faced hardship, but how exactly did they endure winters that could stretch into years, and what was the true agonizing price of their survival? Join us as we journey into the dark, unvarnished side of Scandinavian history, far removed from the glorious tales of Valhalla. Our investigation begins with a climate detective story, unraveling the mystery of when the sun seemed to vanish. Scientists, employing cutting-edge dendrochronology and analyzing ancient ice cores, paint a chilling picture of a world suddenly plunged into cold. The year 536 AD stands as a stark marker, not of myth, but of a very real climate catastrophe. This wasn't some mythical Fimbulwinter, the Great Winter, foretold in sagas, but a global event, likely triggered by volcanic eruptions that ushered in a series of devastating mini ice ages across the northern hemisphere. For the early Norse, this meant a brutal, shortened growing season, if any at all. Crops failed year after year, leaving fields barren and granaries empty. Feeding livestock, already a monumental task in the best of times, became an impossible burden. The chain of disaster was stark and unforgiving. The cold killed the grass, the livestock starved, and then, inevitably, the people began to starve. Archaeologists have uncovered chilling evidence: the remains of cattle and sheep, butchered not in the autumn as was customary, but in the dead of winter, often mere calves, killed out of sheer desperation. These finds speak to a society pushed to its absolute breaking point, forced to make impossible choices simply to see another dawn. When the land offered nothing, desperation dictated a new menu: isotopic analysis of human bones, alongside the less glamorous but equally revealing study of coprolites, fossilized human waste, offers a dirty truth about the Viking diet. The shift was stark, from a varied diet, often including meat, to a grim reliance on surrogates. Bark bread, made from the nutrient-poor inner bark, phloem of trees, became a staple. Lichens, often toxic if not properly processed, and seaweed from the frigid northern waters filled stomachs, offering little sustenance but staving off immediate starvation. Hunting, once a seasonal activity, transformed into a perilous year-round necessity. The risks of winter hunting in deep snow and bitter cold were immense, but when the land was barren, the sea offered a last, desperate hope. Marine resources became critical, a lifeline for communities clinging to existence. Even more disturbing, was the practice of animal bloodletting, the systematic tapping of a living cow or horse for its blood, a precious source of protein that could be consumed without sacrificing the animal itself, a desperate measure to preserve the very source of future sustenance. In settlements teetering on the brink of extinction, the line between food and garbage blurred, then vanished entirely. Amidst the gnawing hunger, another, even more insidious killer lurked: disease. Imagine the longhouse in the depths of winter, 20 or 30 people, along with their animals, huddled together in a single unventilated space. Smoke from the central hearth filled the air, mingling with the stench of unwashed bodies and animal waste. Sanitation was rudimentary at best, creating a perfect breeding ground for pathogens. Paleopathologists, examining skeletal remains from the period, have uncovered a terrifying array of invisible enemies, telltale lesions indicative of tuberculosis, evidence of debilitating parasitic invasions, and the signs of countless other infections that swept through communities with devastating speed. Hunger, the constant companion, further crippled their defenses. Malnutrition severely compromised immune systems, leaving individuals vulnerable to even common illnesses. What had been a minor ailment in a well-fed person became a death sentence for those weakened by starvation. Epidemics, fueled by close quarters and compromised immunity, could wipe out entire homesteads, leaving behind silent, empty settlements. The romantic notion of the iron health of the Vikings is a cruel myth. Archaeological data reveals alarmingly high rates of infant mortality and a shockingly low average life expectancy. The emotional peak of this grim reality is found in the archaeological evidence of mass, hasty burials, entire families, sometimes entire villages, interred together without ceremony, a testament to the sheer scale of death. As resources dwindled to nothing, the very fabric of Norse society began to unravel. Extreme scarcity shattered long-held social norms and the revered codes of honor. Communities were forced to make agonizing, brutal decisions for the sake of the collective, or rather, for the survival of the strongest. Infanticide, the killing of infants, and sanilicide, the abandonment or killing of the elderly, were not acts of malice, but desperate, pragmatic choices to conserve precious resources for those deemed most likely to survive and contribute. These were the grim economics of survival, where every mouth to feed was a burden. Even the sagas, often romanticized, offer glimpses into this darker reality if one reads them with a skeptical eye. Buried within their epic tales are subtle mentions of hunger-driven riots and bitter internecine conflicts over dwindling food supplies. Slavery, already a part of Norse society, took on an even more brutal dimension during famine years. Slaves often became the first victims of ration cuts, sacrificed to ensure the survival of their masters. This was a society living under the constant shadow of Ragnarok, the prophesied end of the world, not as a mythical event, but as a very real existential threat brought on by a relentlessly unforgiving environment. Our investigation concludes with a stark verdict. The early Norse survived not through the strength of their weapons or the glory of battle, but through an astonishing capacity for adaptation and a brutal, unflinching pragmatism. The romantic legends of Valhalla and heroic conquests pale in comparison to the harsh biological reality of their existence, a constant battle against hunger, cold, and disease. This crucible of survival, this relentless struggle against the elements, undoubtedly forged the resilient, resourceful, and often stoic Scandinavian mentality that endures to this day. As spring eventually returned to the north, thawing the frozen earth and bringing a fragile promise of new life, it also uncovered the grim truth of those who did not survive. The bones of the fallen, scattered across fields and beneath hastily dug mounds, served as a silent testament to the winter's grip. Yet, for those who endured, for the survivors, the harsh lessons learned and the brutal choices made offered a chance, however slim, for their descendants to face another year, to rebuild, and to eventually shape the powerful legacy we know as the Viking Age.